Hey everyone. Today I'm going to go over a initial idea that I have for a Puffin deck list. I've been working on a few different versions, and this is the version that I've kind of started to settle in on. So I wanted to go over a few of the different card options that I've chosen and talk about just the deck in general. Starting off with equipment, we have Cogworks Tinkerings. This seems to be our best in slot arm piece. I don't think there's too much of an opportunity to play anything besides this, so I think we are going to stick with this as our arm piece for right now. Crown of Dominion is our headpiece of choice. Getting the gold early has been extremely helpful for the early game of Puffin. If your hand kind of clunks a little bit in the early game, this basically just gets rid of it right away. That way you can have a little bit more consistency on your early turns. We use Final Spring Tunic as our chest piece. I've seen a couple deck lists that are currently running Teklo Foundry Heart as well as a separate option. You can run Teklo Foundry Heart as well, but you're mostly bringing it in as a 2 block and then a 1 block, versus Final Spring Tunic is going to be getting a lot more incremental value over the course of the game from the resources that it provides. Of course, we have Polykranka as our offhand, and we have Spitfire as our main hand weapon here. The last main deck equipment is Unicycle. This seems to be our best in slot leg piece. We have access to a few other options within Mechanologist, but this one just comes out ahead given all of the different interactions with cogs that we have in the deck. For our main board, you're going to see a lot of cards that are pretty standard, I would say, at 3 of for most Puffin lists right now. Cloud Skiff at red, Cog in the Machine, Cogworks Dovetail, Cogworks Zeppelin, specifically at red, Goldwing Turbine at red, Palantir Aeronaut, Sky Skimmer at red, and Soup Up at red. Covering over some of the more unique choices here, Blue Cogworks Zeppelin is a really interesting choice because it's a 4 attack. It makes your opponent really have to decide whether or not they want to commit potentially 2 cards to be able to prevent the on-hit tap to create a new golden cog for the next turn. What's also really nice about this is Cogworks Zeppelin can create a new golden cog if it hits, then you can crank it to continue your turn. So if you really want a turn extender, although this card does cost a little bit more, it still is really powerful to be able to give yourself pseudo go again with the card to be able to continue your turn. Instead of playing the new Conqueror of the High Seas card, we have opted to instead include Command and Conquer still in this slot. I tried out a list with Conqueror of the High Seas, and I found that fairly often I was having a difficult time getting up to the pitch requirement to be able to play the card and then still do things afterwards. So having just base CNC in the deck is kind of an easier spot to be in. You're able to play it a little bit more effectively, and you do have a lot of go again to where you can still lead a card into this card. Some of the blue options that I have included in this deck are a little bit weird, and I realize that not everybody is playing more specifically Steel Street Hoons and Tough Old Wrench. So the reason for including both of these cards is that when I was playing Limited, I realized that Tough Old Wrench and Teeth of the Cog were very powerful at keeping my cogs around for extended periods of time. So I tried to find a way of getting that same feel when you came into a constructed deck build. Since Teeth of the Cog was a 0 for 2 attack, I felt like because of the amount of blue pitch and the handful of yellow pitch that we have, it makes playing Tough Old Wrench over Teeth of the Cog just a smidge better. It's also a 4 attack, so if you ever need to breakpoint for some reason and this card is cycled back into your deck, this card presents a nice breakpoint for later in the game. Steel Street Hoons is a little bit of a weird one. We do really like the Galvanize effect from this card. Specifically, it becoming a 0 for 4 block is extremely powerful, especially at a blue pitch, and so we're playing it half for the Galvanize effect, but also for the fact that this card specifically says if an item you control has been destroyed this turn, this gets +2. When you're in a later game scenario and you maybe can create a cog, but you don't have a very good way of converting it, and then you're drawing into a Steel Street Hoons, you don't necessarily need to boost, and it can be a little bit more difficult to boost in this deck because not every card is Mechanologist, but Steel Street Hoons gives you this option of being able to play a 3 for 5 in the late game, especially when you have some of those cogs that are just getting destroyed at the beginning of your turn anyways. So getting access to this and potentially being able to give it go again as well is extremely powerful. There are a few different choices that you can make when it comes to the blues in this deck. There's a lot of lists that I've seen that are running a large number of copper cogs, and while that playstyle does work, there are some detriments to having that many non-blocks in your deck, so you want to avoid that kind of thing with the playstyle that I've got set up here. As for the sideboard, we've got a few different options that are going to help us depending on what matchup we're going into. Boom Grenade is a good example of a crank item that we want to bring in when we're going against decks that really don't want to block us. Convection Amplifier, on the other hand, we want to bring into decks that do want to block us because this helps us get through some of our on-hits that are present in the deck already. We have 6 D-Reacts here between Shelter and Sink Below. You don't necessarily need one of these to be specifically Shelter or specifically Sink. You can kind of replace this with a 0 for 4 of your choice if you for some reason don't have either of these. Then we have Jolly Bludger. Jolly Bludger is really good into other pirates and other decks that are creating items, so you'll want to bring this into any of the matchups where your opponents are going to be creating gold and really pushing to try and use this on a turn where you can give it overpower and steal a little bit of the advantage that they're taking. The sideboard equipment that we have access to is first going to be our Arcane Barrier pieces. So we have Adaptive Dissolver, that's going to be an Arcane Barrier 1 slot. We can put this into really any equipment spot. You'll mostly though be putting this into either your foot spot or into your arm slot. And then we have Visiotronic Model I. This is obviously just going to be your headpiece of choice when you're going into anything that's like a wizard that's going to send a little bit heavier of arcane damage at you. Our last 2 options here for sideboard equipment are Adaptive Plating and Crown of Providence. Both of these cards are just really solid equipment to bring into decks that are going to be sending larger attacks into you and trying to present potentially on hits that you really want to block out. This gives you a significantly better armor suite than the mainboard equipment, since most of your mainboard equipment don't block for a lot. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you guys coming in to check out my Puffin deck list. Hopefully this is helpful. I know it's kind of brief, but if you have any questions or you think that there are any decisions that I made that are potentially incorrect, feel free to comment and let me know what you think. Thanks again for watching. I'll see ya.